Hi, welcome back to Frequently Asked Fridays, where we here at Martin IP Law Group answer your questions about patents, trademarks, trade secrets, copyrights, and other intellectual property related matters. Today we're answering the question, does copyright protection extend to recorded interviews? And if so, who owns that copyright? The reason we're doing this now, some of you may have read just last week, former President Donald Trump filed a lawsuit against Bob Woodward, and Simon and Schuster over their recent release, I think in October, of the Trump tapes, which were actually recorded interviews that Woodward took with Trump in 2019 and 2020 for purposes of writing his book Rage, which was published in September of 2021. Now, Trump contends that these interviews, and I think there were 20 interviews total, were limited solely for the purpose of the book Rage, and that he didn't authorize them for use in anything else. Fast forward to October of 2022, a year after the original book Rage was released, Woodward and Simon and Schuster released the Trump tapes, which were actual audio books, CDs, and in a couple other formats, which were the actual audio recordings of those 20 interviews. Trump is alleging that he owns the copyright to that and that they can't do that without his permission. So let's dig into what the questions are here as they pertain to that situation. One, are these interviews even protectable under copyright law? And there are a couple of requirements that have to be met. One, it has to be an expression of an idea, and it has to be in a tangible format. So we look at is it an original expression of an idea? And I think clearly, the interview and the content of the interview qualifies. Next, we look at, is it recorded in a format that's tangible? And again, here, I think clearly we meet that requirement too. We have it on, and I don't know if they recorded, I assume it's digital in this day and age, but it's recorded in a digital format where you have a verbatim recording of those interviews, so it does meet the requirement there. Lastly, in order for it to be protected in this type of scenario, there has to be some consent of the author, which may or may not be Trump in this situation, but I think clearly from what I gather from the situation, Donald Trump did consent to the actual interviews taking place. This wasn't a situation where Woodward had a secret tape recorder in his pocket and was recording these interviews. Trump knew they were being recorded, for purposes of a book, so it meets that requirement. So given those three things, I think we can clearly say yes, the interviews are protected under U.S. copyright law. Which brings us to the next question, which is not quite so easy to answer. Who owns the copyright rights to those recordings? Is it, the interviewer, which is Woodward in this case, and his publisher, Simon and Schuster, or is it the interviewee, Donald Trump? And as you might expect, there's not a clear-cut answer in this case. So the majority of the cases, and there's been a handful of cases between about 1966 and 2000 that have all come down on the side of the interviewer here. And those cases typically held that the interviewer, which would be Woodward in this case, owns the copyright to the work as a whole. And that includes the rights to basically the compilation, the format, the structure, the questions that were asked, and the answers to it, and that's all one unitary thing, and that it's protectable and that it's owned by the interviewer. One of those cases, I think, even went on to say that the answers that the interviewee gave to those questions was just ideas, not an expression that's protectable under copyright law. So under that line of cases, Woodward, I think, would prevail here. Now, there's another, what I would call a minority line of cases that hold somewhat to the contrary, and these minority cases have held that the interviewee does or can and in some circumstances, does retain or own the copyright to specific quotes or things that they said, the specific verbiage of their answers to the questions. So you have those two things that are, again, competing lines of authority that are out there that one side or the other could rely on. So the fact, you hear in some media that Trump's claims are outrageous, that they're unfounded. In this case, I would say no, they're not totally unfounded, although they do kind of follow the minority view of the case law in this situation. So is it likely that he prevails? Probably not. Now there are two other possible outcomes here, neither of which have been endorsed or supported by courts, but one, the U.S. Copyright Office endorses and supports is what they call the dual mode. And again, that would be one where the copyright in the overall sort of format, organization, and the questions are owned by the interviewer. The specific answers and quotes given by the interviewee are owned by the interviewee. Again, that's endorsed by the U.S. Copyright Office and some legal scholars, but as of yet, no courts have adopted that approach either. There's also the joint approach, which is, again, not endorsed by any courts, but has been proposed to where they consider the entire interview as one work that has contributions from both the interviewer and the interviewee, making them co-authors of the work, which basically means that if they want to grant exclusive rights to somebody to do something with that work, they both have to agree. Otherwise, each of them individually can authorize or license it to anyone else for whatever purpose they want on a non-exclusive basis. So again, in the co-authorship situation, Woodward would certainly have the right to authorize Simon & Schuster to publish this without Trump's permission. The only two scenarios I think that Trump could prevail here would be, one, if we go under the dual approach, or if we go under the minority court approach. Otherwise, I think Woodward prevails, and I think, my gut feeling is on this one that Woodward is probably going to prevail overall. But let's follow this case and see. We'll keep an eye on it, and when we hear anything further about it or we have any updates, we'll let you know. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you have a great weekend.